Riding in ruts, they can be stressful. No matter what your experience level is or what your skill level is, there's a lot going on in ruts. One of the biggest reasons is we've gone from riding a road like this to riding a road like this. I'm going to talk about a few things to help you feel more comfortable and safe riding ruts. Welcome to Moto Trek. I'm Dusty Wessels, professional motorcycle instructor with West 38 Moto. Let's talk about riding some ruts. So you're riding down the road, all of a sudden you see the dreaded ruts. Nobody likes ruts. Doesn't matter what your skill level is, doesn't matter what your comfort level is. Ruts make us all think twice. To quote my good friend and favorite adventure rider coach, Bill Dragoo, make the rut your road. If you get in a rut, stay in it. That's one of the most important things. We try and avoid it as much as possible. Sure, if you can do that, but we all know those wheels get sucked right into that rut, all of a sudden we're in it. Before you got into the rut, you had the entire road. You were chilling, no problem, you could scan pretty easily and take your time. As soon as you get into the rut, everything becomes faster and everything comes at you faster. And all your inputs to the motorcycle, your vision, very little effect on the front wheel, trying not to steer, all that becomes a lot more important. If you can stay in second gear, do so, because it reduces the drive to the rear wheel. You want as much traction back there as possible. It also makes the throttle a little easier to manage. You can go the same speed in second gear that you can in first without killing the bike. And if you can, do it. Now you're not having to manage so much. The rut's too deep. You just don't feel comfortable shifting to second gear, no problem. Stay in first. If you could stay standing and ride in first, that's no problem. Just understand that any input you give to the throttle is gonna really affect that rear wheel. If you have to sit down, no problem. If that's what your comfort is, if that's where your skills are when you get into a rut, that's fine. The good thing about sitting down is now the ground's closer, so much better foot placement. When you don't have a place to put one of your feet, stick it on the peg. A dangling foot with our human brain is just gonna reach out for something to put that foot on. The other thing we want to be careful of is try not to steer too much and limit your abrupt inputs to the bike. So clutch, brake, throttle, a lot more fine tuning. Instead of thinking of the throttle or the clutch like a light switch where they're on and off, think of them as a dimmer switch. Nice and easy control, nice and easy inputs. If you're standing up, steering goes to your feet. Be very light on the bars, almost like you're riding sand or loose gravel. You really don't want too much impact moving around. Again, you went from having an entire road to now having this much space. So very little steering when you're riding ruts. If the front wheel starts to get grabbed by the rut, here's what you do. Immediately start to slow down, okay? Don't overcorrect, that's the biggest thing. Just loosen up. It's gonna hit it, it's gonna bounce off of it. What we do, our human brain, overreacts and we try and steer away from it. As soon as we do one of these, you've just bounced that front wheel right off both sides of the ruts, and now you've got this wobbly effect, which may have happened to a lot of us. I know it's happened to me. So if your front wheel starts to catch one of the sides of the ruts, what you're doing is you're trying to steer too much. So slow down a little bit, loosen up your grip on the bars, squeeze the tank, the inside of the seat tank area with your knees. What that does is it relaxes your upper body. It gives stabilization down low, which is what you need. It'll relax your grip on the bars. It'll loosen everything up for you. Try not to steer too much. Another thing that makes deep ruts or any rut challenging, especially when you're stuck in it, is vision. What do? You've got a lot going on. You've got to look for a lot of things. Number one, you want to find your exit. So now what we have to do is continually scan back and forth as much as we can to see what's in front of us. Baseball-sized rocks, the rut turns, maybe there's a log, maybe there's a divot or a pothole inside the rut. You have to constantly scan. Again, you're always looking for your exit, or you're looking for a transition point where you can go over the middle to switch ruts. It's easier to do this standing up. You can see much better, you can see much further. If you're sitting down, it's going to be more challenging to see what's in front of you. Just remember, make sure you're scanning, and your scanning has got to happen fast. Something that looks like a small rock 20 or 30 feet ahead, as soon as your front wheel gets to it, could be much bigger. So what's the traction going to be like, or what's the terrain going to be like in the rut? For the most part, underneath you is going to be like what you've come through. But in a rut this deep and this packed down or not packed down, the traction points definitely are going to change. Again, you also only have this much. Sure, your whole contact patch is down, but now you can't move around and get better traction points. You have what you have. You are in the rut, you've got to stay in it. So expect, as soon as the grade changes, so we've got a little bit of grade here, you're going to get deeper ruts, definitely, because that's where things are churning more. When you get a deeper rut, that's where more stuff is going to fall into it. Water, small sand granules or gravel, bigger rocks, embedded rocks, anything else is going to change or definitely affect traction. If you can ride this in second gear, that'll help a lot. That'll keep more traction and less drive going to the rear wheel, so you have a lot less chance of wheel spin. If you're loaded down for a trip on a bike like this, and you come to an uphill that's got really steep ruts, and there's no way for you to get around it, and they're deep, you might question going up that road. That's an indicator right there that you might want to try a different road. It's going to be really tough to go uphill inside of a rut. When you're going up a hill, you pick a line, all looks great, and then all of a sudden you get kicked out of your line. The challenge is you don't know what that terrain's like. Now, walk the rut. Why not? Go see what it's like. I wouldn't just see deep ruts up a hill and say, hey, let's go for it. I'd check them, walk it, make sure you have everything you want, make sure it's comfortable for you. If not, turn around. But with a downhill rut, the nice thing is you're gonna stay in one spot. You're not gonna be going all over the hill. What I prefer to do, if it's really bad, we're talking deep rut, we're talking steep hill, I shut the bike off. Just kill it. Leave it in first gear, or if you have a DCT or not a clutch, you're gonna have to do a little more work. But if you leave your bike in gear, your clutch control now is controlling your rear wheel. So there's your rear brake right there, and your front brake right here. Put both your feet on the ground and walk down. If you choose to ride it, you can ride it standing up with the engine off. Why I say engine off is you don't need that propulsion. You don't need something pushing you down the hill. You've got gravity. The other thing you don't need is managing the clutch and the throttle, trying to keep that bike running. So you're comfortable riding, but you need to change ruts. You're still gonna be riding the ruts, but you've got to switch, so you've got to go over the hump from one side to the next. There are two techniques. One, you're sitting and riding slow. Two, you're standing and riding faster. How you do this when you're standing up is it's almost a lofting technique. You're compressing the suspension on the bike. You're taking your built-in suspension with your knees and pressing on the pegs really hard, even pushing down on the handlebars. It's all about timing. You want to time that so when the suspension rebounds and your body's coming up with the bike, the front wheel is hitting exactly where you want to cross. Pull on the bars a bit and maybe give it a little throttle blip. The throttle blip is going to lighten the front end. Again, lofting technique. We're not trying to raise the front end off the ground, we're just trying to lighten it. So a nice little throttle blip. Your vision is important here. You want to pay attention to exactly where you want your front tire to hit your transition point and exactly where you want your front tire to land in the other spot of the rut. While you're moving fast enough, you pick a good spot, the rear wheel will follow the front. Let's say I've got a really big middle, a nice big hump in the middle right here. That I'm not comfortable just riding over. So I'm bopping along in second gear and I've got to change ruts and this is too steep. I'm going to sit down. Okay, I'm going to sit down and put my feet down. And what I'm going to try and do is get my front wheel as close to 90 degrees as possible. That's going to make it easier to get over that rut. Once you get your front wheel over that rut, stop, okay? Put your front wheel in that rut and position yourself, because now getting the back wheel over is much more of a challenge. Here, you also want to make sure your foot placement is good. Now, when you're bringing the rear wheel over, that takes really fine clutch throttle work. Really nice and easy. If you can crawl up over the top of this with as much traction as possible, as very little impact as possible to the rear wheel, and as very little spin as possible, that's the best scenario. That's not always the case. Sometimes you got to dump the clutch really quick, give it a quick throttle hit to just pop that rear wheel over. Either way, this situation, crossing over a big hump in the middle with both wheels, is challenging. Take your time, do it slow. Riding motorcycles sometimes is like life. You get in a rut, you're not sure how to deal with it, and you want to get out. Next time you're out riding and you find yourself on a rutty road, remember to stay in it. Don't fight it. Look for your exit and have fun.